Okay.
Oh, it's starting to get... Oh, shit, why did I take it out? Oh, it's starting to suck air. No.
Oh, shit. Shit.
I hope you got that. No way.
Safe build stuff!
Hey guys, it's been a while since I've been able to work on a carbon fiber project. Fortunately, my friend Owen recently contacted me about designing and building a carbon fiber roof rack for his new Tesla to transport his hang glider. For this project, we'll be experimenting with some novel molding techniques, namely a DIY/hobby grade level of RTM, or resin transfer molding. I think you guys will find the process interesting, so stick around and let me know what you think. The rack will be a rectangular frame with the longitudinal members made from off-the-shelf carbon fiber tubes and the shorter cross members made from repurposed hang glider parts, broken carbon fiber down tubes, for the airfoil shape. The carbon parts we will be making in this video are the corner brackets. These were a good opportunity to practice my surface modeling and mold design skills in SolidWorks. The molds were particularly tricky because the part geometry required a non-planar parting line, which is something totally new to me. It took a few tries in SolidWorks and a bit of Googling to figure it out, but I eventually got it. So the trick here turned out to be using the SolidWorks parting line tool and then manually adjusting the parting surface to get it to part the way I would want. This is a bit tricky and maybe could use a tutorial video of its own. Let me know in the comments down below if you're interested in something like that, and I could go over it with you in more detail. My wacky idea with these parts is to try a resin transfer molding technique. We can't use prepreg or a traditional bladder or vacuum bag setup for this due to cost and tooling limitations. I don't think vacuum pressure alone, as in a resin infusion process, would be enough to draw the resin into the thick laminate and somewhat complex tubular geometry. So we will try pressurizing the epoxy to pump it into the laminate as well as drawing a vacuum. It's either going to work or be a complete disaster. To make this work, we will use a 3D printed core with a bunch of holes drilled in it. Resin will be pumped into the core where it will seep out into the laminate. The core acts as a resin flow medium as well as allowing us to wrap the bottom layer of carbon fiber over, forming a lap joint. The main downside to this is that the core will basically be solid resin, which means the parts will be quite heavy. However, weight is not a design requirement for these parts. It's just a rack that goes on top of his car. So we'll go with it for now, and later on see if we can add the additional complexity to make the parts hollow. Spoiler alert, we basically can. The molds for this project will be 3D printed using Pryline carbon reinforced polycarbonate. This is my second favorite high-performance FDM material. It prints nice and is generally good to work with, although not quite as strong as the Carbon X material from 3DX Tech I've used in the past, like on the Carbon Bicycle project. It is much cheaper though, so it's perfect for mold making. We need 4 molds in 2 halves each, so 8 total parts to print, and each part took around 8 hours. A lot of handwork is required to clean up the molds and make a nice surface. I did a rough finish and then handed the molds over to my friend Brandon York at B York Customs on Instagram. He does custom bike and automotive painting, so he finished, painted, and sealed the molds for us. This proved to be a great investment as Brandon did an amazing job. Having the molds professionally painted and sealed proved quite valuable in the molding process. Here you can see I'm using masking tape to create a rough template for the carbon plies that we'll be cutting out later. This is a pretty common technique. It's not perfect, but it definitely helps to get the sort of the rough shape out ahead of time. It's kind of tricky to pull the tape out of the mold, as you want to keep it all together as one piece. Then after that, you want to lay it down on a piece of paper, and then you kind of just have to make various cuts and folds to just sort of get it to lay down as flat as you feel like it can lay down. Again, we're just trying to get a pretty close approximate shape. We don't need to be exact for what we're doing here, and this will be good enough. Also significantly cheaper than a surface unfolding software, so we'll just stick with this. To prep the molds, we'll go with your standard application of part all release wax, about 4 coats of wax, wax on, polish off, and then about 4 coats of PVA mold release. This technique is quite laborious, but it worked perfectly, and we had a flawless release of the molded parts every single time. For the trash, maybe? Yeah. Next, we prep the vacuum bag and breather cloth material. And add the gum tape around the perimeter for your standard envelope bag.
Print this with holes?
Your hands.
Yeah.
No. Oh yeah, this is perfect.
Here we're cutting out the carbon fiber plies. The only tool I was able to find that could mark on the carbon fiber was this white oil pen, which kind of worked and kind of didn't work. It's a bit tedious. Definitely could use some help on this part. We're using your standard West System epoxy. I later on realized that we should probably be using a resin infusion epoxy, but when we started this process, I didn't really know what the process was going to be, and just wanted to stick to a material that I'm familiar with and something we could source on Amazon. To get the plies to stick into the mold, I first apply a light layer of epoxy and then just to tack the carbon laminate in place.
So carefully. Get it in there. It's not bad. So if I get like a toe like this coming out of there, I think it's probably best just to remove that.
Yeah.
Right. Going in, I'm going to try to sort of emphasize that spot.
Mm-hmm.
It also might have been that when I made these paper templates, I sort of didn't get that area very well.
We're looking for about 2 millimeter wall thickness of carbon fiber, which ends up being 8 plies, quite a bit to work with here. So this is something later on we would also refine.
Okay, this one might require a little bit of scissor trimming. Let's see here.
The first 4 plies are basically the size of the mold face. The second 4 plies are oversized so we can form the lap joint.
YOLO with the core.
Now I am installing the core, which we previously prepped with the infusion hose in place. Then we can go ahead and wrap the carbon around the parting line to form the lap joint. And I'm just using some epoxy here to get it to tack in place. This is a very messy, very fiddly, highly imperfect process that we later on would refine and make this much better. This looks like a complete mess, like there's no way we're going to be able to get the mold to close. I unfortunately don't have footage of that, but we actually were able to get it. Now we do basically the same layup process for the other side of the mold. Okay, we got the mold closed, and now we add a whole crap load of screws. Tip here is to always use the largest size hardware you can fit. We could have definitely fit larger. These are M5, could have definitely fit M6, probably even M8. Larger screws are just, larger hardware is just easier to handle, especially when you got gloves on and stuff. And larger threads are less likely to strip, so always use larger hardware if you can. Okay, so the mold is closed. Now we're just kind of using a crap load of gum tape to seal off the inlet. And then for the exhaust, I'm using gum tape and then some breather cloth to make sure we have a a path for the air to flow out into the exhaust tube.
So hopefully air can go up the air vent, right? And then join.
Then we wrap the whole thing in breather. I'm adding some breather over the top here where I had an additional air vent that I was concerned about air getting trapped. Turned out to not be an issue, but we had it in case. And then also adding more breather cloth over the bolts on the backside, the nuts on the backside, and that was to help prevent the vacuum bag from tearing on in case there were some burrs or sharp edges on that hardware.
Tacky tape, gum tape, some people call it.
And then just a crap load more gum tape around the inlet and outlet hoses to make sure we get a nice seal along those edges.
Okay.
And then it's always exciting the first time you draw the vacuum down.
You can hear it leaking. So it looks like a nice vacuum.
Sure does.
So just be quiet for a second. I don't hear any obvious leaks.
Yep.
To pressurize the epoxy, we're using a standard, pretty cheap, off-the-shelf pressure pot. You can get these on Amazon. They're not very expensive. They're made for like spray painting type applications. You can see you put your paint or epoxy or whatever in there, screw it shut, then add air pressure. These are pretty simple to use, but we did learn some things the hard way. They can get a little bit sporty, a little bit exciting, as you will see later on.
So I think I'll just go to like 20 psi.
Yeah, that should be plenty. Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so we're satisfied with the vacuum on the mold, and now we start pumping in resin.
Based on bubbles moving.
We just let it flow until we see it coming out here. I think I want to kind of slow it down a little bit. There's bubbles because there's bubbles in the epoxy.
Sure.
Soaking through out here. And I can see resin soaking through out here. That's okay.
Yeah. I guess. Yeah.
This whole area should get wet.
Yes.
Yeah, underneath it. Can you really see it under here?
After a couple of minutes, it was clear that some of the resin was leaking or seeping outside the mold cavity. This is where things start to get a little exciting.
It's like sucking the, or it's just bubbly. It looks like it might be sucking the breather fabric through there.
That's true.
Maybe not.
But despite a little bit of resin leaking out, you can see now we have resin coming out of the exhaust, the outlet, so the whole mold cavity should be filled with resin.
Okay.
Oh, it's starting to get. Oh shit! Why did I take it out? Oh, it's starting to suck air. Damn it! Open this. No.
Oh shit! Shit.
Well, we made a crucial mistake here in that we ran out of epoxy in our reservoir, so we actually just started blasting air at about 10, 20 psi into the mold when it was already infused. So, is this gonna work or be a total disaster?
This needs to be ready to close that off.
I was gonna say, do we wanna? There you go.
Not about that. I hope you got that. That's cool.
Huh.
This looks like a complete disaster, a total mess, but you want to just let it cure anyways and see what happens. It's usually probably always easier to clean up dry cured epoxy and resin than it is a whole big vat of sticky, messy resin. So we'll let this cure overnight and then see what we get. All right, fast forward the next day. Here I am demolding and see if we can salvage this. If the part's ruined, hopefully the mold isn't, and we can, work on the process and make a new part. But you can see it's gonna be quite a lot of work to get this mold apart. And in this process, I'm realizing a mistake that I made. I did not apply mold release to the entire outside of the mold. That's a mistake I will only make once. Some good old-fashioned elbow grease, some prying, some cracking, some dremeling, and I was able to get access to all the screws. And all of the screws I was able to get out except for one that I had to drill out, but not a big deal. All right, moment of truth. Here it is. Always the exciting part, opening up the mold. What are we going to have?
No way. Oh. Sometimes you get lucky. Wow. I don't know. Am I shocked? Am I surprised? That's pretty freaking good. It's an absolute brick.
So I'm kind of blown away with how good this looks. Obviously, the part's going to need a lot of trimming and cleanup, but I knew that was going to happen anyways. Our parting line was always going to be kind of ugly with a lot of flashing. Because of the nature of the 3D printed mold, we can't really have really nice sharp edges. And the ends where all the breather cloth is attached, well, those get sawed off anyways. Then it's just, a lot more handwork to cut off the ends and trim it up and make the part look nice. Okay, so there we go. That's the first part. The process could use definitely some refinement, but it definitely shows a lot of promise. I'm pretty shocked with how good this looked. You can see it ends up weighing 313 grams, which is pretty crazy heavy because it's a solid block of resin in there. But now I'm inspired, and now let's take it to the next level where we can see if we can make these parts mostly hollow. That's it for this video. Thanks for checking it out. Be sure to get subscribed for part 2 of this series where we figure out a way to make the parts mostly hollow and eliminate the need for the vacuum bag.